Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. We are gonna waste a little time here, let people get logged in. I'm Jess. I work for Sonoran Prevention Works. I'm the development manager, and here comes Haley.
Hey.
Hey. Just barely got started, letting people log in, telling everybody happy Arizona Gives Day. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm seeing a lot of people sign in. You know what? I love to know where people are signing in from. So if you're from Arizona or outside of Arizona, throw it in the chat where you're logging in from. Let us know. And I'm Jess Patrick. I'm the development manager at Sonoran Prevention Works. In a few minutes here, we'll get started. Just going to waste a little time. Haley, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? And we'll do it again a little bit later.
Yes, hello. I'm Haley Coles. I'm the executive director at Sonoran Prevention Works and the policy wonk. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about different bills that were in the air and stoked that you all are here.
Yeah, same. Thanks everybody for logging in, seeing people say hi. What's up, Mesa, Arizona? Hello, Tucson. How's it going? Another Tucson. Thanks for being here. I'm based in Tucson, so love to see Tucson representing, showing up. Appreciate you guys being here. I just want to mention today's Arizona Gives Day. I'm our development fundraiser at Sonoran Prevention Works. So part of my position here is to help with all the fundraising that we do. Arizona Gives Day is one of those days for Arizonans to give back to causes that they care about in the community. Today we have a goal of $8,000. You'll see our fundraiser down here. It says live fundraiser for Sonoran Prevention Works. You'll see we have a goal online on Instagram for $1,000. That'll be $1,000 towards that $8,000 overarching goal that we have for the day. So you can donate down there, or you can go to arizonagives.org/Sonoran Prevention Works, either of those places, and donate. I'm seeing people still signing in. What's up, everybody? Love to know where you're from. A few people have mentioned already. I'd also love to know if you have questions. If you have questions, go ahead and add those using the question function or using the comment button. I'll gather those and we'll make sure that they make it into the conversation with Haley later on. All right, so as people are joining, just want to talk a little bit about Sonoran Prevention Works. I think a lot of us here probably know what Sonoran Prevention Works is and what we do. But we're a statewide organization founded by people who use drugs, for people who use drugs, to make sure that Arizona is a safe and healthy place for people who use drugs and everyone else. We work, hey Graham, we work across Arizona in every county. We're able to mail harm reduction supplies out from top to bottom all across Arizona. And then we also have outreach in Pima, Maricopa, Yuma, Cochise, Yavapai, Coconino, Mojave. I think that's all of them. We've got outreach folks and staff in all of those areas that do things like syringe services, testing for HIV and hepatitis C, naloxone distribution, syringe service programs that are like needle exchanges, workshops and training for professionals and for people who aren't professionals, just the general public. We work with people who are involved in the criminal punishment system, and then policy work, obviously, because that's what we're here to talk about. So we're a nonprofit, which means that we rely on grants to fill in the gaps where we can't find, we rely on grants that don't pay for all of the things that we need, like syringes. So we depend on donors, which is why we have me, the fundraising professional here, to fill in those gaps where grants don't pay for things like syringes. So just want to mention again, as I see people are still joining, we've got like people, that it's Arizona Gives Day. We've got a fundraiser, it's down at the bottom. We're trying to raise $1,000 here, $8,000 in total. That money helps us buy supplies, like I mentioned, like pipes, like syringes. It's really exciting in Arizona that syringe service programs or needle exchanges are legal now, and they're all above board. What the tricky part is, the unfortunate part is while Arizona says, yes, you can have those needle exchanges, but no, we don't have any funding for the needles that you need for those syringe exchanges. Wah, wah. Such a bummer. So we have to ask people to fund us so that we can find the money for those syringes and fill those gaps. Okay, I think we'll probably get started. Haley, do you want to introduce yourself again?
Yeah. For anybody who just joined, I'm Haley Coles. I'm the executive director and resident policy nerd at Sonoran Prevention Works.
Thanks for being here on Arizona Gives Day, for talking to us about policy things. Just want to let people know one more time that you can add questions to the chat. We'll be collecting those to weave into our conversation later on with Haley about all the things policy, harmful, and helpful that are happening across Arizona. So Haley, we'll start with maybe an easy one. How are things going down in the legislature in Arizona?
I wish I could say that they were better. We have a lot of bad bills this year that are looking like they're going to pass and make their way to the governor's office. There were a few good bills that were killed. And then there's one so bill related to the 911 Good Samaritan law that is probably going to pass. I'd say that this year is a record for bad drug policy bills. So, the bad bills take advantage of the ongoing fentanyl hysteria and weaponize people's genuine concern for children to further perpetuate the racist war on drugs. So that's kind of a new tactic as far as the war on drugs goes in Arizona at our legislature. Some of the bills are like really cruel and really kind of diabolical, where you have to get deep into the bill to understand that it's actually doing something way worse than it seems like is happening. So one of the bills, I'll talk about it later, it's related to children. On first read, it's like, oh, okay, maybe somebody can get behind this. We don't want kids overdosing, blah, blah, blah. Of course, there are really bad implications with that on its own, but when you get deeper into the bill, it just becomes like an overall target for people who use drugs. Yeah, we're also seeing a lot of politicking. So there were a few bills that were introduced by Democrats that Republicans would otherwise support, but they are just being intentionally killed so that Democrats don't have any wins. And it's very likely that by the time the session is over, there won't be a single bill that makes it to the governor's desk that was introduced by a Democrat. They're also crafting some of these bad bills in a way that will make it look really bad for the governor to veto. So that's what I mean when I say that there's a lot of politicking. Obviously, nobody wants to see fentanyl causing overdoses. Like, so many of us have lost people that we loved to overdoses related to fentanyl. Nobody wants that. We all want to see action taken. But we have seen for decades that increasing punishment for drug use, sale, trafficking, etc., has never, ever decreased overdoses. So that's certainly not going to happen here. And it's only going to perpetuate the war on drugs, which disproportionately harms Black, brown folks, people who use drugs, people with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So while we do have some answers to the overdose crisis, increasing punishment is not one of them.
Yeah, that sounds overwhelming and really scary for folks who are in Arizona, and sounds like it's going to set a bad precedence for other states to follow. I feel like I've heard that there's something going around about capital punishment for distributing fentanyl. Is that true? Is that real?
That is real, y'all. Like, it is real. So there is a bill. It is House Bill 2802. Actually, wait, no, I lied. That's a different bill.
There's so many. When you've got that many, it's easy to confuse them.
List of bad bills, y'all. So it is SB 1029. This is the first degree murder capital punishment bill that says anybody who is connected to the sale or distribution of fentanyl that ends up causing a fatal overdose can be charged with a class 1 felony, which is first degree murder. The punishment for that is life in prison, and it also makes a person eligible for capital punishment or the death penalty. So when this bill was first introduced, there was a lot of outcry from the community saying people who use drugs share drugs with each other all the time. Y'all are saying that you want to protect people who use drugs and people who are at risk for overdose, but then on the other hand, with this bill, you're going to put those people in prison for the rest of their lives or subject them to the death penalty. So that was a really big sticking point. And so the person who introduced the bill said, okay, we'll just say that anybody who's involved in a criminal enterprise anybody who's involved in a criminal enterprise related to manufacturing the drug, those are the folks that we're targeting. Brogan asked who sponsored that bill. I'm pretty positive it was Senator Kern. So their tactic there, they allayed people's concerns, because when it says criminal enterprise, you think, like El Chapo or whoever. But criminal enterprise is 2 or more people. That's it. A criminal enterprise is defined as 2 or more people. So it's very loosely defined, and it doesn't actually resolve the issue. So yeah, that's looking like it could make its way to the governor's desk. My hope is that she would veto it, but because of all the politicking that's happening, they're gonna punish her for it.
Yeah, I hate to hear that. I just want to reiterate, it sounds like with 2 or more people, we're not talking about, drug lords and gangs. It sounds like if I'm using and a friend of mine is using with me and I shared with them and that person unfortunately overdoses and passes away, I'm then culpable. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, the term criminal enterprise is so loosely defined that if you and I were using together, and maybe I gave you $10, then we could be considered to be in a criminal enterprise, and thus you and I could be sentenced with life in prison or capital punishment.
Right. That's wild. So it really does. I mean, it sounds like it really does affect everyone in Arizona, not just these big criminal enterprises. Every individual who has a friend that might be sitting next to them.
That's right. And I think it's important too to note that Senator Christine Marsh, who lost her son to a fentanyl overdose several years ago, she came out and she opposed this bill. She said that punishing people who are associated with people who use drugs is not the answer. And so that was really brave of her to say that, given the fact that she had a son who passed away. So yeah, it's a really, really bad bill. We have seen bills like this pass in other states, and it's only causing chaos, right? It's already illegal to sell or distribute fentanyl. So why do we think that making it, turning it into a murder charge is going to stop anybody? It's not going to.
Right. Wow, that's wild. Gosh, I feel blown away a little bit, but that one it sounds like one of the worst ones that we might be looking at in legislature. It's not? Are there, I hate to hear that. Are there more, is it fentanyl related bills or is there something different?
So I'll start with the other fentanyl bills.
Okay.
There is another one that basically, the way that we responded to the meth crisis, 15 years ago, creating additional punishments for meth, it's trying to do the same thing with fentanyl. So it increases punishment for possession, use, sale, transport, manufacture of fentanyl to a minimum of 5, maximum of 15 years. So if I have never had any charges and I am caught with one pill that contains fentanyl, I'm being sentenced to a minimum 5 years in prison. If I have any other previous violation, that minimum bumps up to 10. What's really cruel about this bill is that it makes the person ineligible for early release. It makes a person ineligible for probation. It ties judges' hands, right? This is like that old school drug war legislation that we've been seeing for the last 20, 30 years. We thought maybe we were making some progress, but certainly not at all, right? Fentanyl is the new boogeyman. We know that if a person knows that they are taking fentanyl, they can take precautions, right? And they are not sentenced to death, right? They're not necessarily going to die of a fentanyl overdose if they know that they are taking fentanyl. The problem is that people don't know that they're taking fentanyl. This is where it becomes so dangerous. The bill number for that one is House Bill 2802. A piece of that too is it is written in a note to the legislators that they anticipate that over the next 10 years, this bill, if it passes, will increase the prison population by 3,200 people, and they're asking for an additional $9 million to the Department of Corrections. So again, huge waste of money, ruining people's lives, and we know that it does not work to reduce overdoses. So that's one of the fentanyl bills. There's another one that's just like straight racist dog whistling. It's House Bill 2469. It is just like 2 sentences, and it says that we are declaring that fentanyl coming across our border is a public health issue, and that the Department of Health Services should do everything in its power to stem this public health crisis. That's it. So it's not asking for anything to happen. It is purely racist dog whistling. And if it gets to Hobbs's desk, my hope is that she vetoes it, and then she's going to look really, really bad for vetoing something that says that the fentanyl overdose crisis is a public health crisis. But really, it's just like pure racism. There's one other bill, House Bill 2226, that just establishes a fund using state money for increased prosecution for people who use, sell, or distribute fentanyl. So those are some of the specific fentanyl bills. I can talk about the really, really bad bill unless we've got any questions that came through that I didn't see.
I haven't seen any. You've been doing a great job answering them as they come in, I think. So I just want to remind people, like Haley said, we'll take questions as we're talking to, and I can hold them if it's not pertinent to like what we're talking about in that second, but definitely add your questions to the chat. I'll hang on to them until we have a second to ask those questions. But yeah, I think, oh, we got one right now. Let's just do this one real quick. What would happen if that bill in particular, the one you were just talking about, was signed just saying it is a public health crisis?
Nothing. You know, it'd be one thing, it'd be a maybe more complicated thing if signing this bill saying that it's a public health crisis then increases funding to tackle the overdose crisis in a way that is harm reduction centered, but it doesn't. Like, this is why I'm saying it's racist dog whistling, because there's nothing that happens as a result of that bill being signed.
So the racist dog whistling part is just we're blaming it on coming across the border. It must be someone else's fault. And those people happen to not be US Americans or not be white. And that's where the racism comes in from.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah. I mean, let's talk about the worst of the worst, and then we'll move on.
Yeah. So, there is a bill that is worse than the one that makes fentanyl distribution to somebody who then dies of a fentanyl overdose first-degree murder. This is that bill that on its surface, to the average person, doesn't look horrible. So it's around kids. I mentioned that there are some bills that focus on children. So this bill, it is Senate Bill 1027. Almost all of these bills were introduced by Senator Kern, by the way. I'm not sure if this is a Kern bill or not, but so it says that anybody who manufactures fentanyl that then causes any kind of injury to a minor, it is considered a dangerous crime against children, and it's a class 2 felony. So I think that the average person, right, might see this and say, well, sure, we don't want kids getting hurt because of fentanyl, so right on. Obviously, that's not our stance. We don't believe that any increase in punishment for anything related to substances is going to help the problem. But it makes it a class 2 felony. It is a 13-year minimum sentence if you have no previous charges. If you do have previous charges, it is minimum 25 years. That is a quarter of a century. Where it gets really diabolical, in my opinion, is further down in the bill. It says that anybody who possesses with intent to sell, manufactures, transports, or administers, right? So like me and my friend are getting high, they don't know how to use needles. I help them, right? I administer,
Right.
whether they overdose or not. If I have administered, manufactured, possessed for sale, or transported fentanyl or heroin, now we're bringing in heroin, then it is minimum 5 years, maximum 15 years. And this has nothing to do with children.
Mm-hmm.
So the bill, people think that this bill is there to protect children, but then they just weave in this little thing at the bottom saying, oh, actually, we're going to increase punishment for people who administer fentanyl or its analogs or heroin.
Mm-hmm.
This also makes people ineligible for probation, makes people ineligible for early release. So it's not only cruel, it's incredibly manipulative to people who are trying to understand what this bill is. So that is also going to be used more often
Mm-hmm.
than the felony one murder charge, right? It's still going to be a big process to bring charges for murder against somebody who is involved with the manufacture or distribution of fentanyl, like I talked about with Senate Bill 1029. But this will be used far more often, which we know is going to increase the number of people who get sent to and through the criminal punishment system.
Right. Wow. I mean, I can't help but every time you're talking about a bill, it's further down in the bill, it's woven into the language. And so it sounds like they're assuming that we're not paying attention and we're just going to see this is good for kids and vote for a thing or ask our representatives to vote for a thing because they assume we're not paying attention. So I'm really glad that you're here to tell us about this stuff and to have already looked through all the fine print and let us know like what it's actually about and what we should be helping with. It looks like we've got a question. Would this also affect pregnant drug users? Could they be prosecuted under, I think, that particular one that you were talking about?
Yeah, SB 1027. That's a really good question. I don't know, right? I don't know what the criminal code is saying these days about an unborn fetus, whether that's considered to be a child or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why this couldn't be applied to pregnant people who use drugs.
Mm-hmm.
There is, however, another bill that specifically targets pregnant people who use drugs.
Mm-hmm.
House Bill 2530. This is another bill that looks on its face like a good bill. I've seen agencies that I respect sign in to support this bill, I think because they perhaps don't understand all of the ramifications of it. So House Bill 2530 says that if DCS receives word that there is a pregnant person who is using drugs, they will share that information with Access, and Access can make a referral. It specifically says, DCS might not necessarily open an investigation. And I think that them putting that in there made all the advocates say, okay, great, right? Mm-hmm. All we're doing is referring people to treatment and services. They can go if they want to. They don't have to go if they don't have to. It also says that if a healthcare provider or a social worker during the course of their work comes across somebody who is pregnant and using drugs, that they need to refer the person to services. Again, doesn't seem like a big deal, but healthcare providers and social workers have come out saying that they're concerned that they could lose their license, right? They might not know the appropriate place to refer somebody. And the way this law is written, it doesn't say whether or not that provider could lose their license for not making a referral or not making the right kind of referral. Access and ADHS did not sign in to support this bill. It is going to create a lot of work for them. There's no evidence that shows that something like this is going to help. And it just increases surveillance of pregnant people who use drugs. It creates more criminal regulation around people who are pregnant and their bodies, right? So there's no good that can come from that. And right, like good healthcare providers should already be providing referrals. And we know that if a person doesn't want a referral, they're going to send that referral to hell, right? Like if they don't want
Right.
to seek additional support or services, they're not going to go. So making that referral to them isn't going to make a difference. All this bill does is increase surveillance. It adds to the criminal code. Yeah, it's not a good one, but this is where I see people I respect who are signed in to support it. And I think it's just one of those, somebody in the comments said pulling the wool over our eyes. And I think this is those bills.
Yeah. Wow. So are there any more negative bills like that, or can we move on to positive bills?
Yeah, I think that's the list of the bad ones that are like very directly related to drug policy. We've seen lots of bad bills that are related to targeting people who are unhoused. Lots of anti-trans bills. Like if anybody's been paying attention, you know that so many bills that are going through the legislature are horrible.
Right.
Yeah, there was some promise. There were some good bills. So one was Senate Bill 1159 that was introduced by Senator Christine Marsh, and it expanded on her bill that she had passed in partnership with us in 2021 that legalized fentanyl test strips. This bill removed the word test from the paraphernalia clause, so basically would open up any drug checking equipment to no longer be considered paraphernalia, and it would be considered legal. This is really important, right? We're seeing all kinds of cuts, not just fentanyl, showing up in people's dope, and it's not good enough to find out what's in their dope after they're dead, right? Right now, the only way we know what's in their dope is when we do an autopsy. So we need to be proactive. We need to be checking people's drugs before they consume them. And this bill would have done that. It did pass out of committee in the Senate. And when it was on its way to the House, it was killed through some weird rule that they just made up. So drug checking is not going to become legal anytime soon, at least not this year. There was another bill, Senate Bill 1160, also introduced by Marsh and co-sponsored by Kern, who was the mastermind behind so many of these really bad fentanyl bills, that would alter the Good Samaritan 911 law. So right now it says that if you and I are using and you overdose and I call 911 for help, you and I cannot be charged with possession or use. However, and we've seen this happen across the state, people can still be arrested, right? You can be arrested, you can be detained, you can legally be held for 24, 48 hours. That can ruin your life, right? You're supposed to pick your kid up from work. You're supposed to show up to your job the next day. It's very destructive. And this is why we haven't really advocated very hard for the current Good Samaritan 911 bill that was passed about 5 years ago, because it's just not good enough. So this bill would have fixed that by adding the word arrest. So it would say that a person cannot be arrested or charged for possession or use of a substance if they called 911 in the event of an overdose. That one was also killed, unfortunately. So another bummer thing about the Good Samaritan law, so it was passed 5 years ago, but it was temporary. So it said that 5 years it would expire. So the Good Samaritan 911 law that isn't even that great anyways, but maybe does something to prevent people from being charged, that is supposed to expire this summer. So there was a bill that Marsh and Kern co-sponsored that would extend the Good Samaritan law and just make it permanent, right? That's great. It passed out of the Senate, and then when it got to the House, I don't know if y'all know what kinds of crazy stuff these legislators do, but they did something called a strike everything amendment. So this amendment literally crossed off all of the text on this bill and just added on the language for a brand new bill, right? So this bill has Marsh's name on it. I had signed in to support the bill, right? I immediately went in when I found this out and withdrew my support for the bill. But a lot of people don't know that this happened. And it adds language for a bill that has nothing to do with overdose. It basically says that if you are a passenger in a vehicle and you get stopped by police for a traffic violation, and you don't give the law enforcement officer your name, date of birth, and address, you can be charged with a class 2 misdemeanor. So this has nothing to do with Good Samaritan. This has nothing to do with overdose prevention. There's a bunch of good people whose names are associated with this bill that has now become very bad. So, you know, that was one more diabolical thing that happened this legislative session. The only semi-positive bill that I think might pass, it was introduced by Representative Wynn, who I'm pretty sure is up in Yavapai County, and it just extends the current Good Samaritan law for 5 more years, right? So there was a law that would make the Good Samaritan law permanent. Mm-hmm. There was a bill that would protect people from arrest with the current Good Samaritan law. Those were killed. So what we're left with is one that extends the current very mediocre Good Samaritan 911 law for 5 more years. So that's like the most positive thing that I have to share today that has happened in the legislature that looks like it's actually going to pass. You know, my hope, and I'm just kind of like resting everything on this, is that the governor does not sign these bills once they get to her desk. We'll see what happens, but that's kind of like our last stand. I just read today that you know, the governor has vetoed so many bills that she's about to break a record, and I think that this is more of that politicking, right? They're sending her bills that they know are bad, that they know she's not going to support, that's just going to make her look like a horrible person for vetoing that. So this is definitely a part of that strategy.
Wow. Wow. Well, I just want to remind folks in the audience, while I'm gathering myself after all that if you have questions about any of the bills that we just talked about, or any of the ones that we haven't talked about, maybe that we might know about, put them in the chat. And I guess my next question, Haley, is what can we do, the audience and SPW, what can we do to help out, help advocate, help support people who use drugs across the state? What can I do?
Yeah, so, you know, if it were earlier in the session, I might say to sign in to oppose the bad bills. I might suggest that you call your local legislators, but we're so far down this path that it really doesn't matter if people sign in to support. Legislators' minds are already made up. And I totally get that a lot of people don't want to participate in that way, and that's very reasonable. You know, I think the most important thing that we can all do is to continue taking actions that we know lead to a reduction in overdose, and that continue to destigmatize people who use drugs, continue to challenge the racist narrative of the war on drugs. And, you know, before we had these laws, SPW was still making sure that naloxone made it into people's hands, making sure that safer use supplies made it into people's hands. A few other organizations across the state were doing that. And like, we are all the ones who save lives, right? It's not these politicians, it's not these legislators, it's community members who care deeply, who are getting naloxone out there, who are having those conversations with the weird uncles about, you know, why people who use drugs deserve to live and deserve to thrive. So that's what I ask you all to do about drug policy. Please keep on talking about it. You can volunteer with us. We have over 500 volunteers who are responsible for basically making all of the naloxone kits that we distribute throughout the state. We have volunteers who help us do outreach, right? Volunteering is a great way to get involved. Of course, making a donation, you know, it $5, $500, whatever it is, like, you are helping to contribute to community-based solutions that center people who use drugs. So yeah, that's what I would suggest for folks who.
Yeah, I mean, volunteering is so important. I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned yet today is that Sonoran Prevention Works is the largest community naloxone distributor in the United States, and we work solely within Arizona. Every naloxone kit that we give out, I mean, like 99.9% of all the naloxone kits that we give out were made with volunteer hands. So it's so important for us to have that volunteer involvement. And then all of our syringe programs, all of our needle exchange programs, our syringe service programs, The syringes that we give out are bought with unrestricted raised funds from donors like you, which is why we're having this talk today, why we talk about advocacy, and why we're celebrating Arizona Gives Day and asking folks to support us. So I just want to mention again, Haley said, please donate to support us and all that work. But you can find down here a live fundraiser for Sonoran Prevention Works. We're raising $1,000 on Instagram today. $8,000 throughout the day is what we're hoping for. So if you want to support us monetarily and you have that in your budget, please do so down there. That'll really help us out. Haley, is there anything else? Did we miss anything? Any bills? Any topics we need to talk about?
No, I think that's those are the bills that we're seeing in the legislature this year. You know, like, we'll continue to expect some bad bills as the years go on. My hope is that we will start seeing some better bills that actually expand access to drug checking equipment. You know, maybe bills that are modeled off of the cannabis decriminalization laws, right? I think that, you know, let's not lose hope. We just have to continue fighting, and we have to continue being involved. So I just super appreciate everybody who was interested in learning more about drug policy bills here in Arizona. And yeah, I hope to continue to see all of you mobilizing and taking action to support people who use drugs.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to point out again, it sounds like they think we're not paying attention, and that's why we think it's so important to pay attention and to share the information. We're not going to gatekeep that from anybody. So, it looks like we have another question. Does SPW have any sort of group that is focused on policy or legislation?
Not.
I feel like it's Haley.
Time. It's I mean, it's really hard to find grant funding for people who will do policy work. So it's just me in my spare time. But you know, our staff and our volunteers, I think, do policy work, do advocacy work in the ways that they interact with the public, the ways that they interact with people who use drugs. So I'd certainly encourage folks to get involved with us as volunteers, as donors, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to do a lot more policy work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Haley. I just want to say thank you again for being here and for sharing your information with us so that we can all pay attention to what they're trying to sneak past us through legislature. I hope that Governor Hobbs doesn't let that fly, and if you know, and we'll continue supporting and advocating for people who use drugs across the state, regardless of what happens in legislature. I think we know that we take care of each other like we always have, and that more policy that's bad like this, more restrictions and surveillance on people who use drugs is never going to work. And so we'll continue at SPW and across the state as citizens to take care of each other. Y'all, I just want to thank everybody for being here today, for listening. And I just want to remind you again that it's Arizona Gives Day. If you have the opportunity and you have it in your budget to support us financially, we've got a fundraiser down here. You can also support us on arizonagives.org/Sonoran Prevention Works. I appreciate y'all. I see some positive, supportive messages in the chat. Thanks so much. What's up, Webby? And thanks everybody for being here.
And yeah, I just want to mention, like, I saw a bunch of you all donating as we were having this conversation. So like, we noticed, we see you, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for all of the support.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. All right, everyone. Thanks again for being here. We'll be saving this. You'll be able to share this link once we have it downloaded, and we'll make sure that everybody has access to it. Please share this information with folks that you know. Please share this information with people across the state, and don't let our legislators get away with this kind of shady nonsense. We got to pay attention and take care of each other. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Hope to see you in the trenches. Thanks, Haley.
Bye.
Bye.